Hello everybody and welcome to Silverstone for the second race of the Radical European Masters triple header around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. We had a very, very dramatic race yesterday with late safety car prompting a one-lap shootout, and I'm sure that we're going to have plenty of excitement once more again today. It's Ben Evans talking to you from Silverstone. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Josh Duran from Radical Cars. And well, Josh, we had a really fascinating race yesterday and plenty of drama.
Yeah, first of all, good morning. It's a pleasure to be up here today. And yeah, I think yesterday's race was fantastic. It was certainly lots of action. And for me, the highlight was the last lap sprint shootout, which I think gave us some interesting result. And we saw some drivers on the podium that really deserved it for that race. So yeah, it was fantastic.
And wonderful to see Jamie Constable doing so well. But this is the man who perhaps could have, should have, would have won the race. Bradley Smith, the 2014 Radical European Masters champion, returned to the series this weekend in the Spider. And he shares front row with Johan Scheer. And because of a problem for Alain Costa, Johan's co-driver yesterday, we didn't see what Johan can do, but he's normally very quick.
Yeah, we know Johan's got some fantastic pace, and we've seen that throughout, certainly this season and previous. So I think him and Bradley off that start line is going to be a real interesting opening to the race.
Well, that's Chris Hyman, who is starting the car that he shares with Darren Burke, and then Man Halalos likewise taking to the start of the 61 entry that he shares with Alex Capardia. And the safety car was working very well for Alison Capardi yesterday. They had so many success seconds to contend with, and they still got the car onto the podium.
Yeah, they're a great pairing, and they've had some great success this year. And yeah, I think that really did work well for them, and they're really pushing to try and get on that top step. And yeah, if they can get the race together, they'll be there, I'm sure, soon.
Now here is one of the foremost of the Super Sport class cars. That is Stuart Mosley in a car that he shares with Ricardo Donor. If you're a long-time Radical watcher, you will know Stuart very well, or you might not know his new black helmet, because it used to be a yellow helmet with black diamonds. And then John Corbett in one of the Spiders, who starts in 7th, and John was looking to be in fine form yesterday. Ivan Lukasevich, the Russian driver, in the car that he shares with Konstantin Gudkaev, yesterday's Super Sport class winner. And Ivan has been a revelation for me this season, as has Jim Booth, who I was delighted to see got on the race podium yesterday. He's improved with every race.
Yeah, it was fantastic yesterday to see Jim up there, and I know he was really chuffed. And yeah, he's coming to this European series and brought a real breath of fresh air. And I think everyone around the paddock was really happy to see him up there.
Alex Mortimer in the 1000th ever Radical SR3 that he shares with Mark Crader.
Yeah, that distinctive gold chassis that we've seen all year.
It's not made of solid gold, is it?
I know, I'm sure he wishes it was.
So here's the grid in full then. Bradley Smith and Johan Scheer on the front row from Chris Hyman and Man Halalos. Then Tony Wells and Stuart Mosley, John Corbett and Ivan Lukasevich, head of Jim Booth and Alex Mortimer. Yanni Herpia, who was very impressive yesterday, and Martin Verity, one of several graduates racing this weekend, who's come from the SR1 Cup. Then Jason Rishover and Richard Carver, Mark Hignett and the Swedish driver Alex Andersson, Jean Gandar and Jeremy Ferguson, then Marcello Marattiotto and Neil Houston, Talal Bin Laden and Wesley Fournier. And Jamie Constable is at the back of the grid, and the reason for that is that he is sharing the car, certainly in the final race today, with Mike Cantillon, but they went out in the wrong order in qualifying yesterday, and so Mike, who's not racing in this race, set the time that would have given the grid for this race. So unfortunately, Jamie starts from the back.
Yeah, no, correct. That was a little mistake that yeah, unfortunately happened. But I think, you know, Jamie showed such great pace yesterday that you know, with his car and his frame of mind, he should really be able to work up that grid today.
I really thought actually that after yesterday's win, he should have been promoted from Constable to Sergeant.
I think you're right. He showed a great performance, and yeah, it's been great having Jamie back this year. And I know him and Mike love the racing in the Radical series, so yeah, it's exciting to see what they do today.
So the car's about to head off on the green flag formation lap. It is a 60-minute race. They have got to make their mandatory pit stop, and that comes between 25 minutes and 35 minutes of the race. And if you didn't join us yesterday, well, first of all, shame on you, but you can watch it on YouTube and catch up. But secondly, we had a safety car that came seconds before the pit window opened. It served to bunch up the field, and I think as much as anything, Josh, that the teams will just be hoping that they don't have those interruptions, they can let their strategies play out.
Yeah, it's certainly difficult when the safety car comes out. I know, for example, yesterday all the teams getting ready to bring the cars in, because obviously the advantage of pitting whilst the safety car's out is such a large advantage, you don't want to miss out. And obviously with it dipping in last minute, there was a few sort of reshuffles on the strategy. So, you know, exciting to watch, not so easy for the team. So they'll be hoping for no safety car, so plan out the pit stops.
I was talking to the safety car driver Ian Barnett this morning, and he was. I said, "Well, you had a quiet day yesterday." He said, "Well, yes, I did until the last hour of the day, but it wasn't. It's to do a disservice to say the race was really overly dramatic with the two safety cars. It was more in both instances. We just had cars in slightly awkward positions, and in that situation, discretion always in favour of safety, and that's why we had the safety car, just to make sure that they could be recovered safely. So away we go now, behind the pace car, ahead of the rolling start. And on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the Spider with Bradley Smith at the wheel. And this is the second season of competition for the Spider. And what I've really enjoyed is just seeing how each and every weekend that car gets rolled out of the trailer. It goes quicker. And yesterday, Bradley at one point was 47 seconds up on the first of the SR8s in the Masters class.
Yeah, Bradley had that phenomenal lead yesterday, and yeah, the car's been a real work in progress, and we've been developing it so much. And I think this year it's really showing what it's capable of. And yeah, with every weekend the car's improving, and yeah, just seeing it go around Silverstone, the pace is fantastic.
So, to explain, there are two classes in the Radical European Masters. There is the Masters class, which is for the Spiders and the SR8s, and then we have got the Supersport class, and that is for the SR3 RSX and the SR3. And it's wonderful to see these different types of car and the different characteristics, because the Spider is such a smooth car and an absolute rocket on the straights, whereas the SR8, the drivers really have to hustle. Then you get into the SR3s, the SR3 RSX. The braking distance in that car, Josh, it's just so astonishingly short. Whenever you're out on track and you're watching them, you think you should have stopped then, should have stopped then, should have stopped then. Now he's on the brakes. Yeah,
I think it's fantastic having the different models out there, and it just provides interesting. And obviously the Spider's so quick on the straights, and they love the long, smooth corners. But as you said, the SR3s are just so strong in the braking zones. So it's fantastic to watch, and it does provide for good racing.
So the field just heading out of Stowe and into the Vale. We're using the full Silverstone Grand Prix circuit layout this weekend, and it's a real opportunity for the drivers to stretch their legs as well. And it's a circuit that promotes some great racing, because you've got the overtaking opportunity down the hanger straight into Stowe. You can challenge into Vale, which is what we're watching now. You can challenge into Abbey, challenge into Village, and again into Brooklands. So we should be in for a race with plenty of overtaking, particularly yesterday in the Supersport class. It was absolutely ferocious at times. You have 4 or 5 cars running within a second of each other.
Yeah, it is certainly a great track, especially for the Radical, and a number of the drivers have spent years and years sort of learning their racecraft here, so it's a track that they know and love very well, but it's still challenging, and we've seen a number of mistakes and over the weekend, and yeah, so it's really challenging, but fantastic to watch the cars go around this circuit.
Well, there was Jamie Constable. He starts from the back of the field and will be looking to carve his way through the pack. He should make his way past the Supersport cars reasonably easily, because one of the nice things about the classes in the Radical European Masters is there is a very pronounced speed differential, which means that you do get 2 races within a race. But once he gets up to the likes of Jim Booth, John Corbett, it's all going to get a little bit trickier for Jamie as he looks to pick his way through the order. Now, there we catch a glimpse of the 88 car. It's started by Mark Hignett, but he'll hand over to Ollie Hancock at mid-race distance, and Ollie was flying in yesterday afternoon's encounter.
Yeah, Ollie, phenomenal driver in the Radical, and yeah, I know Mark's been certainly improving, and it's great to see him on this European Masters series as well. So they should be a great pairing to watch today.
Because although we've got some drivers like Bradley Smith who are going the whole distance single-handedly, others like Johan Scheer, with whom he shares the front row, will be switching with a second driver through the pit stop cycle. But for now, they begin to bunch up side by side. They make a magnificent sight. We haven't quite got the sunshine that we enjoyed earlier at the weekend here in Silverstone, but at the same time, you can't ask for much better conditions to go motor racing. As Bradley Smith paces the field around Luffield, they're bunched up side by side, and then as they come through Wookert, they'll look for the lights on the gantry to change. Then we'll be racing for the second of 3 times this weekend in the Radical European Masters. It should be fun over the next hour. Oh, and a little bit of smoke coming from possibly Johan Scheer, as away we go now as the lights change, and Bradley Smith, unsurprisingly, parks the car in the middle of the road. asserts his lead as they turn through Copse. Shear into second, Alos up into third. It's Chris Hyman who's lost out. He's demoted by John Corbett, also possibly by Stuart Mosley, who's jumped up ahead of Tony Wells. And there is Jamie Constable. He's overtaken about 10 cars already by the time they arrive at Beckett's.
He's had a fantastic start, yeah. We thought this would happen, so he's really starting to attack. He's going to come up behind the guys in the 8s and the Spiders soon, so it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets on getting through those cars.
But they've all made it through the opening couple of corners cleanly, and then run down the hanger straight for the first time as Bradley Smith stretches his legs on Johan Shear, then Alos, then John Corbett, Chris Hyman. Here comes Jim Booth to the inside of Stuart Mosley. Mosley also looking to challenge Tony Wells, and that black number 3 car of Stuart Mosley, just to remind you, is the Supersport class leader, but Stuart knows this Silverstone circuit very, very well. He has raced at Le Mans, he's raced in radicals for years, he knows every trick of the trade, as he demonstrates by jinking past Wells as Constable slips his way past Ivan Lukasevich.
Yeah, it was a fantastic move there, and as you said, yeah, Stuart mixing with the larger chassis cars here, but he's such a good driver, knows the car so well, and obviously this is a circuit which he's spent many years at, so it'll be interesting to see him fighting through this early stage of the Grand Prix.
So they swing through Farm on the brakes into Village, and Jamie Constable, I'm making, he's up into 10th place already on this first lap of the race. Meanwhile, Yanni Herpia, the black 17 car, to the inside of Lukasevich. This is a battle for the Supersport podium. He's going to squeeze Lukasevich to the outside as they head through entry onto the Wellington straight. That's very, very close. Barely a sheet of paper between the pair of them as Jamie Constable is looking for more places as he tries to dart to the inside of Stuart Mosley. Mosley gets boxed out by Andrew Ferguson, and as Ferguson runs wide, it allows Jamie Constable to gain yet another couple of positions.
Yeah, and you see with the Stuart Mosley and that SR3 there, it shows just how late they can be on the brakes there. So yeah, really good demonstration of how good that car performs.
But already the leaders are through. It's Bradley Smith who leads, second place Shear, third Alos, fourth John Corbett, fifth is Chris Hyman, sixth is Tony Wells, and seventh then Jim Booth from Jamie Constable, 23rd to 8th over the course of just 5.9 kilometres of racing. And he's on the prowl for more here, Jamie Constable. That is the fluorescent orange car with the black and white markings.
So I suspect he's going to catch the tail of Jim Booth very soon, but I know Jim's really keen to get another strong result.
Oh dear, and that is Ivan Lukasevich and Yanni Herpia. We saw they were running very close coming down the Wellington Straight. Unfortunately, they've got a little bit too close for comfort into Brooklands. Lukasevich has rejoined, but at the tail of the field.
I think the two of them were racing very close, and see there on the Johan car, I think his radio's come unplugged there. You can see the wire just trailing behind his helmet.
Yeah, that might prove to be a little bit of a distraction, or at least he's going to have to hope the pit board's accurate.
I was going to say, it will also cause potential confusion because he may not know just yet that's hanging out, and at the pit stop window, obviously the radio's critical, but they do have pit boards on the pit lane, so it means they can hang out information, so hopefully the driver will be tuned into that.
The other slight concern is that the scrutineers might just be keeping an eye on that to make sure the wire doesn't get entangled with the rear wheel on some of the corners, or indeed into the engine as well. So he'll hopefully not receive the meatball flag for a mechanical scrutineering issue, as nonetheless at the moment he's pushing on. Here is Ivan Lukasevich trying to recover to the outside of Jean Gandar and not being altogether successful.
No, he's certainly trying hard up there and not wanting to give up any of those places, but yeah, there's a few sort of mistakes there.
And also in trouble is Mark Hignett, who's had a little bit of a spin through Abbey, and he was taking Jason Rishover off with him. Here's another look at it, and well avoided from everybody concerned, actually.
Yeah, see exactly what's happened there, and yeah, actually it seems that everyone's come out fairly unscathed from that, so well controlled and good reactions there from the drivers to get out of that situation.
Well, the last thing you want is to arrive into a corner and see your rival sideways right in front of you.
Yeah, the trouble is you're so focused on the corner as well that you do have to really react quickly, which is why we sometimes see the accidents that are just unavoidable, but they've done well there just to use that straight road. And again, Silverstone, great circuit because there's a lot of the corners, plenty of runoff, and it means that drivers can make mistakes and still get back on the track.
Here is the race leader, Bradley Smith, and Bradley just trying to break Johan Shear's resistance. Johan, though, staying with him, gap between them just 1.2 seconds as Smith navigates his way through. Meanwhile, a change further behind. Jamie Constable moves up ahead of Tony Wells. and he's also passed Jim Booth on this lap too. So that places Jamie into 6th place, and it seems that he's really happy with the way the car's working for him this weekend. And Silverstone, Josh, shuts a difficult circuit to get the setup right for, because you want as little downforce as possible for the long straights, but at the same time you need plenty of aerodynamic grip for the slower, more technical sections.
Yeah, certainly always getting that balance is difficult, and I know certainly yesterday there was a strong tailwind into Cop, so you know you're really wanting all that rear wing you can to give you that grip around the corners, but similarly because of the long straights, getting rid of that rear wing really does help you. But Jamie seems to have really worked on the setup, and he seems very comfortable, and he looks very good out there, so I'm looking forward to seeing how he attacks the next couple of cars.
Taking cops in a car which has got aerodynamic grip like these Radicals is just one of the most satisfying driving experiences you can have, because certainly some cars it's absolutely flat, others you just have a little bit of a lift, but you just turn in and the car bites and you just find yourself hurtling through.
It's incredible. The car's full throttle all around the National Pit Straight, flat round Cops. It's phenomenally high speed, and if you watch at Cops you'll see the rear ends just wanting to skip out, but yeah, the driver's very confident. They all know they can go at flat, so yeah, it's great.
We're about to complete the 3rd lap of the race, and Constable gains another place. He moves to the inside of Chris Hyman. Great to see Chris back in the championship this weekend, and a very experienced competitor in all manner of motorsport, Chris Hyman.
Yeah, it was actually a year ago that Chris was out in the 8, and it was at Silverstone, and he's come back, I mean, straight on the pace straight away, and yeah, great driver, lots of knowledge, and he knew exactly how he needed the car, so good weekend for him so far.
Well, Jamie Constable, absolutely phenomenal so far. Meanwhile, Yanni Herpia to the inside of Martin Verity. Oh, that's a lovely move from Yanni, because there was exactly an SR3 RSX's width to the inside and absolutely not an inch more.
That's a fantastic spot to get that, and both drivers doing very well to race hard but not touch there. So, yeah, well done to both of them, but fantastic move.
It's one of the nice things about this championship is the racing is invariably very close and competitive, but what you don't see are the silly incidents that you do get in some other categories. The drivers generally give each other plenty of respect, and it means that they can trust that it's very unlikely they're going to pick up damage as a result of anything malicious from a rival.
Yeah, it's a very friendly paddock, and all the drivers are here to, go out and race, and they want to be out every session. So whilst they race very hard, and we do have a few bumps here and there, most drivers are very respectful, and yeah, sort of give each other the necessary space where it needs to be.
Here are the race leaders, and Johan Scheer coming back, isn't he? Bradley Smith. Bradley not really making good his escape. And I think the real frustration for Bradley in yesterday's race was he was driving the perfect race. He got a lap time he knew he could run at without getting through the best of the tyres, and the safety cars rather scuppered that. And again, I'm going to be intrigued to see in the next couple of laps, if Johan Scheer starts to probe, if Bradley says, okay, Johan, you go through, because I think I'm going to have the legs in Alain Costa in the second half of the race.
Yeah, it looks like Johan's just taken 4 tenths out on that lap, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Bradley deals with that. It's certainly going to make him push harder, so tyre management is going to be real key in the second stage of this race.
Meanwhile, John Corbett is demoted by Jamie Constable, who goes up into 4th place from the back of the grid. So that's 19 places gained in 9 minutes for Jamie Constable, which is absolutely phenomenal. But now it starts to get a little bit harder, because Manhal Alos is his next target. And Manhal is some 5.5 seconds up the road.
It's really important that Constable now catches up to Manhal, because obviously with Kapadia coming in the car for the second stint, he's going to be a very good pace. So as much as he can close this gap now, and if he can try and attack Manhal, is going to help him out for the second stage of this race. But he's looking great, driving really well, and yeah, let's see how much he can catch up to Manhal.
Well, of course, the way that performance is balanced out is with the success seconds, as Johan Scheer looks to probe Bradley Smith, which incur from preceding races. And well, Bradley, as a result of a very disappointing last lap yesterday, has only got 5 success seconds. For Johan Scheer, Alain Costa, they haven't got.
Oh, and Bradley just runs wide there, and Johan takes that opportunity to nip round the outside. So just got a little bit too much pressure on Bradley there, and he's just run it wide.
So Johan Scheer takes the lead of the race. First real mistake of the weekend from Bradley Smith. Now, what can Johan Scheer do? Here is another look at it. He was never going to make the apex. And actually, Scheer, almost mesmerised by Bradley Smith's line, realised he was offline and flung the car into a slight slide to correct it.
Yeah, very well controlled there, and like I say, he was just waiting for that gap to open up and just taking the opportunity. So interesting now to see how much Johan pulls away, and what Bradley can do behind him to keep up.
And again, it's very interesting to see the different characteristics of the cars, because the Spider is not a car that bites, but it's a car that demands consistency of the drive. You've always got to be thinking, you've always got to be quite precise to get the most out of it. And on that occasion, Bradley just understeering out wide, and Shear now really pressing on, trying to build a bit of a buffer. He and Alain Costa's pit stop is going to be 5 seconds shorter than that of Bradley Smith, but then we would expect in the second half of the race that Bradley's probably going to have a couple of seconds a lap over Alain Costa in terms of outright pace.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's important now where you can see Bradley's really pushing to keep up, but at the same time he needs to really manage those tyres, because it's going to be key for him to keep good sort of tyres, so he's got that grip in the second half to be able to push and catch up with Costa, and hopefully for him to regain the lead.
You see Johan Shear in full concentration. Bradley Smith just so smooth at the wheel. Here is the third place man, Manhal Alos. So Manhal already 12.5 seconds back from that leading duo. And he and Alex Kapadia are also have got 25 seconds of success seconds in the pits. So it's going to be a tall order for them, one would suspect, to get onto the podium. But at the same time, you can see that Manhal is about 6 seconds clear of Jamie Constable and the rest of the Masters class runners. In the Supersport class, it's Stuart Mosley who leads from Alex Mortimer, then Yanni Herpia, Marcello Maritiotto and Martin Verity. Even Lukasevich, after his run-in with Herpia earlier, is now back up to 16th.
Yeah, certainly Manhal, there is a slight gap to the front runners, but he's definitely maintaining that gap between Jamie Constable, which is going to be key for him in keeping that position. But Jamie's got his eyes firmly set on catching up with Manhal there, and you can see he's pushing that car really hard.
Down they come then into Brooklands. They swing their way then in towards Luffield as Chris Hyman trying to apply a little bit of pressure to John Corbett, but Corbett, knowing what he needs to do, focusing on the corner exits. Now let's see what the gap is between Alos and Constable, and the gap goes out, in fact, by 0.3 of a second.
Yeah, certainly he is maintaining that gap very well, and it's going to be interesting to see just what Jamie can do, because there's still a few minutes left to the pit stop, so I'm sure he's going to be pushing on hard, and his team will be telling him to really push.
Well, the pit window opens in 12 minutes. However, in the Radical European Masters, you can only pit in once you've gone past the board that says pit lane open, and so in reality that means we're not going to see cars pitting in probably for another 15 minutes or so. We'd expect to see Manhalos coming in right at the start of the pit window to hand over to Alex Kapadia. The same possibly for Chris Hyman to Darren Burke. For the single driver efforts, like Jamie Constable, like John Corbett, they've got the luxury of picking exactly when they're going to duck into the pit lane, as Constable swings out of Stoke, downhill into the Vale, and climbs up, just gets on the brakes, snicks down the gears, and into Club, around the right-hander, and then Jamie Constable just follows that racing line. Has to be careful though, he's just picked up a warning flag for track limits, and that's the second time this lap as well that he's had arguably all four wheels over the white line at the edge of the track.
Yeah, I think it was very clear on the exit there, he was right over, and a number of cars this weekend, even through testing, have been caught up on that, so they're going to have to be really careful not to take that further, otherwise they're going to be brought in and penalised for that.
And it's always a shame when you do see drivers getting penalised for track limits incursions. Meanwhile, Chris Hyman still nibbling away at John Corbett, but John focusing on his corner exits. He knows that he's got the straight line speed advantage, and therefore as long as Chris isn't able to hustle him through the technical sections, he should be just about fine for keeping hold of that position.
I think John's doing really well there, keeping up with the rear end of Constable. John's had a great year in the Spider, and his pace has been getting better and better, and this is a strong race for him actually, so he's well poised behind Jamie there.
Accelerate through Woodcote. There is Tony Wells in 7th place, and he's just clear of Jim Booth and Jeremy Ferguson. And again, Tony Wells has got the very rapid James Littlejohn waiting in the wings, and after a fairly disastrous last lap of the race yesterday, they don't have too much in the way of success seconds. And there, back of your picture, is the leader of the Supersport class, Stuart Mosley, and he's got a 3.5 second advantage over Alex Mortimer. And Stuart using Jim Booth as a good point of reference in terms of pacing. He knows that the He'll be quicker than the Spider through the corners. He knows the Spider will be much quicker on the straights. Stewart can just see he's on that knife edge, isn't he, between being absolutely hooked up and the car just starting to move a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And awfully for Stewart, he's got two jobs here. He's got to get that car as far up the track as possible to give his teammate the best opportunity at handover, but also he's got to look after those tyres. And yeah, he's getting that fine balance between keeping up good pace, but preserving the tyres so that the second half of the race isn't difficult.
Exactly, particularly as he's got Ricardo Donor waiting for him. Here is Alex Mortimer, and Alex sharing the car this weekend with Mark Crader. There is the gold chassis we've been discussing, and Alex has got a very substantial advantage over Yanni Herpia, some 13 seconds. That's going to be good news for Mark Crader when he takes over from Alex Mortimer, particularly as they have no success seconds in the pits.
Yeah, these two guys in the SR3.
Oh, somebody's had a moment. It's Jim Booth.
Jim Booth, unfortunately, yeah.
You could hear the squeal of the tyres, and Jim Booth's having a quick spin at Village, and it's so easily done because obviously what you can't get a sense of from the television pictures is it's been really sticky and humid all weekend, and it's quite sapping for the drivers at the wheel. And now we're getting to 1/3 race distance, the concentration might just start to waver.
Yeah, and certainly for likes of Jim Booth, he's a single driver, so he's doing the whole hour race on his own. And yeah, I think it's very hard to appreciate just the temperature in the cockpit and also the physical strain on your body during an hour-long race.
And also with 3-hour-long races this weekend, essentially that's like driving 2 Grand Prix.
Yeah, it really is. And you know, you've got to remember these guys, majority of the guys like Jim Booth, they're not professional drivers, they do it as a hobby. And yeah, it's a real challenge for them, but again, that's part of the challenge they love, and it's why we do the hour-long races. It pushes the drivers and allows the race to really unfold.
And also, it's a great opportunity to just enjoy slightly longer races, because it's a very different driving discipline for an hour's race as opposed to, say, a 15-20-minute sprint that you get in many other categories.
Yes, certainly. In our UK Championship, obviously, where we have 2 sprint races and 1 slightly longer race of 40 minutes, but the 2 20-minute races very, very different. So we just see there on Johan's car, that cable getting very close to the rear wheel, and I wonder if that's actually pulled it out of his helmet now. Yeah,
possibly. It's very hard to see because it's almost an optical illusion, but it's still hanging on there.
Yeah, so like you said earlier, I think just hopefully the scrutineers don't pull that one in before the pit stop, but I did see it just getting caught on that rear wheel there.
But again, the wheel arches mean that there's not too many open surfaces for it to get entangled with.
But he's certainly pulling a bit of a gap there for that lead from Bradley. He's really found the sweet spot of that car. So.
Certainly has. He's 6.5 seconds clear, our race leader, Johan Shear. Second place is Bradley Smith. Third, Manhal Alos. Fourth, Jamie Constable. Fifth, John Corbett. Sixth is Chris Hyman. Seventh, Tony Wells. And then the Supersport podium is currently Stuart Mosley from Alex Mortimer and Yanni Herpia. Here's Bradley Smith. Now, Bradley in second. I don't think he's going to be overly upset here by the ground that Johan is making. He's 8.5 seconds up on Bradley. But Bradley will be confident that he is running at the pace that's going to deliver the quickest 60 minutes for him, and that he might be able to overhaul Alain Costa once we've got through that pit stop cycle, which gets underway in 6 minutes time. So Bradley just checking his digital dash there, clearly just keeping tabs on something. But again, lovely shot there with Bradley Smith's, and it shows the driving technique, which is these drivers are always thinking a couple of corners ahead, and Bradley looking well up the road. Now here's Yanni Herpia to the inside of Jim Booth, and some assertive overtaking from Yanni today.
Yeah, he's very confident out in that car, and just wonder if Jim Booth's got any problems with his tyres. He seems to be struggling a little bit with grip.
So Bradley just always makes it look so easy. And he's a great example, Josh, of somebody who's come all the way through the Radical ladder, starting out in the Clubman's Cup, winning that, going to the UK Championship, doing very well in that, coming on to the European Championship, winning that.
Yeah, certainly Bradley's a great driver and someone that we've known at Radical for a number of years. And yeah, it's fantastic, these young drivers that do start out in our very sort of early stage classes and come up. And he's come into this car this weekend and found great pace and yeah, very smooth driving. And I think he's probably just backed off slightly from Johan, realising he can't get past, so just save those tyres and make sure he doesn't overcook them before the pit stop. But as you said, he's going to have great pace in the second half of the race, so stands a very, very good chance for a good result today.
And also, we've got a lot of drivers in the race as we watch Manhalos in third, who've come up from the SL1 Cup, which is Radical's entry-level category. And that basically is the whole package. You get a car, you get a calendar, you get tuition, you get everything you need to become a proper racing driver. And I think what's also for drivers who want to go down that sports car route, that the SL1 Cup as an entry-level car gives you a heck of a lot of punch.
Yeah, the fantastic thing about the SR1 is it's very affordable and a great car, but similarly it's very quick, and it's a great introduction to high downforce racing. And the idea of the SR1 Cup was purely that people could come from just having it as an interest or a hobby and actually get out racing, but be able to work their way right up to this European series. And we've seen drivers go on from here into Le Mans series and further on, so it's fantastic to see those drivers develop. And yeah, the whole package of championships really suits drivers that are wanting to progress and get better and better.
Well, we just got a little bit of bodywork flapping on the tail of Alos's car. I think the good news is it's mainly the wheel arches and not having too much of an effect on his rear wing, which would be really causing him to worry.
Yeah, he must have missed a small amount of contact maybe in the early stages. It's just developed a little crack, but it seems to be holding on. And the good thing about the fiberglass bodywork is it does have a lot of flex and it is strong. So hopefully that will hold to the pit stop, and the team will be able to tape that up to secure it for the second half of the race.
Well, Jamie Constable, having found a way past John Corbett, hasn't exactly run off into the distance, and it has actually lost another second or so to Manhalos over the past 2 or 3 laps.
Yeah, I think at a fantastic start. He's done well to get where he is. Yeah, certainly he's holding position, but yeah, not making any further progress forward. So interesting to see what he'll do at the pit stops and see what happens after that.
Right, for Jamie Constable, bad news. He's got a stop-and-go penalty for track limits. Well, he said a couple of laps ago he's getting the warning flag, and unfortunately he has gone over that limit one time too many. And so he is going to have to come in the next 3 laps of that stop-and-go penalty. We've also had the similar badge of dishonour awarded to Talal Bin Laden in car 8 for the same thing. But the drivers in the briefing at the start of the weekend are told very, very clearly what the track limits are and that they're going to be enforced.
Yeah, the drivers know only too well, and someone such as Jamie Constable knows exactly the rules. And it's difficult getting that right mix and balance of pushing the car hard as possible, but they've got to be observing the track rules. And this is a real shame because Jamie's had such a fantastic first half of this race. So hopefully it won't drop him back too much, but he's going to have certainly more of a task on his hands for the second half of this race.
Chris Hyman chasing down the car of John Corbett. And this a nice battle. Corbett is going to be released into a little bit of clear air in 2 or 3 laps' time. And anyway, the pit stops are just 2 minutes away. We've got more cars picking up the warning flag for track limits. Just having a look, I don't think it's anybody too significant amongst our front runners. I say that, in fact it is. Johan Scheer, the race leader, is one of the drivers who has picked up the warning flag for track limits, so he is going to have to behave well.
Yeah, the team's going to be on the radio to the drivers when they see that note come up, and really trying to get them to observe that, because nobody wants to be taking penalties today, and especially for the likes of Johan up front with that lead. The last thing they need is to come in for a stop-go. So I hope the teams are getting those messages out and they can get them under control.
It's so frustrating if you pick up and stop and go penalty. It just disrupts your rhythm, but it is all part of the discipline that's required when you're racing, and the art is to get right up to the limit. You can see there in the background Tony Wells just to the very, very edge of what's permissible, but that's really the key, and it's what's so impressive with the drivers at this level is you see more often than not they know exactly to the millimetre what they need to do and then do it.
Exactly, yeah. It's just getting into that rhythm. Here we have Bin Laden in for his stop-go.
Oh no, he's lost the engine. That's a real shame for Talal Bin Laden. Oh, he just about gets it underway again. Easily done. And then the next thing he's got to make sure he does is not to exceed the pit lane speed limit. We've seen it time and time again. Drivers who come in for a stop-and-go penalty have had the red mist well and truly down, whizzed out of the pits and picked up a second penalty for pit lane speeding.
Yeah, certainly by this point the drivers are getting a bit hot and tired, so the last thing they want is a penalty, and they can get very frustrated. But yeah, again, important to observe that pit lane limit.
Johan Scheer, our race leader, having made that move on Bradley Smith about 10 minutes ago, now leads the way over Bradley by 14.3 seconds. This is going to be a nice buffer for Alain Costa to inherit, because as the pit window is now open, we would expect to see Johan staying out until the very last possible moment, because the pit window is open until you drive past the pit lane close board. So Johan's going to have time for probably 4 more laps after this one.
Yeah, certainly. You just got to be very careful that they don't push it 1 lap too far, but the teams know exactly where they're at with the lap times, and we've got a replay here of Stuart Mosley around the outside of Jim Booth there. So fantastic move. Does it stick?
A little bit of showing off there for Stuart Mosley. It's possibly Andrew Ferguson. He was going, or Jeremy Ferguson rather, he was going around the outside of. And now John Corbett has got Chris Hyman closing up onto his tail. Chris, something of a master of high downforce cars. He's raced in British GT, also raced in the Formula Palmer Audi Championship. Radicals, as we've said, for many years, he knows exactly how late he can brake the car. He's also used to the power that's available, but the problem he's going to have is that John Corbett can just focus on making sure he exits smoothly onto the longer straights, use the straight line speed of the Spider to rebuild that bit of a buffer before then Chris reapplies the pressure through sequences like this at Village and the Loop.
And interesting now, because obviously you've got a number of drivers, some that are staying in the car for the whole race and others that are switching. So those drivers that have already done the first stint are staying in. Although they're getting a bit warm and tired, they're sort of in the groove of the track and they know exactly where it's at. Those drivers that are hopping in now are getting straight back out onto the race with sort of no warm-up or preparation, and they've got to be straight on it. So very interesting time for the drivers.
And here is the first of our pitters. It's Jason Rishover. He is going to be doing the whole race solo. And that's not a bad idea. Get the pit stop out of the way whilst the pit's nice and quiet. You can see the figure of James Littlejohn there, poised and waiting for Tony Wells. Also, the bright yellow helmet of Margot Cenchetti and Alex Capardia. Meanwhile, another look at Jeremy Ferguson being hustled by Stuart Mosley. This time it's Mosley looking to the inside at club.
Yeah, Stuart's all over that car, and very, very impressive driving from him, and both of them actually here, so it's going to be a good battle into the pit stops.
And now the pits are very, very busy. Just saw Jamie Constable coming past us. I suspect that was Jamie having his stop-and-go penalty. He'll then have to go back round for another lap before he serves his scheduled pit stop. The Mech Tech team getting ready for Bradley Smith. And that indeed is Jamie Constable's stop-and-go penalty.
Yes, and that's we'll be back out for a lap or two and straight back in. So obviously frustrating because they've got to do a whole another pit stop for that. So
John Corbett, his pit stop has been completed. There's not surprisingly Johan Scheer staying out for quite a while. I'm surprised the Manhalalos hasn't ducked in yet, actually, to hand over to Alex Capardia. We'd normally expect to see them swapping quite early on.
Yeah, that's definitely a surprise. I wonder if he didn't see the board or communication didn't quite get out there, but I'm sure he'll be in the next lap.
Stuart Mosley leads the Supersport class. We expect him and Alex Mortimer, there's Alex second in the Supersport class, to stay out for a little bit longer, because when you've got the pro driver and the amateur driver, they'll often come into the weekend saying, right, we're going to do half of the race each, and then as soon as they're in with a sniff of a win, it's, well, no, let's revise the strategy and see how the race comes to us. As now our race leader Bradley Smith rolls down pit lane. He's going to have to jump out of the car while it gets topped up with fuel. And we've got more stop-and-go penalties, including for the race leader, Johan Scheer. So Johan Scheer gets a stop-and-go penalty for exceeding the track limits. So does Jim Booth. And so also does Jeremy Ferguson.
Yeah, very unusual to see so many penalties in such an early stage of the Grand Prix. But yeah, too many of the drivers there just pushing the limits. And real shame that Johan's got that, because that's really going to damage Alain Costa with that lead.
It's been that sort of a season for them, hasn't it? Every single time they have looked like they're in a golden position to, at the very least, get on the outright race podium, if not win it. There's been something, a mechanical misfortune, an ill-timed spin, now a stop-and-go penalty, which just halts their charge. So all of that 22-second advantage that Johan Scheer had over Bradley Smith has been whittled away. Meanwhile, we watch Ollie Hancock jumping into the car that he takes over from Mark Hignett. Likewise, Darren Burke takes over from Chris Hyman.
obviously drivers there just waiting for that fuel to go in for safety. So as soon as that fuel fills up, they'll be back in. And I know they really struggled on this car yesterday with the temperature. The fuel tank had expanded, so getting that fuel in is quite difficult. So as soon as that's done, Darren will be hopping in.
Now, for Johan Scheer, the other complication here is, of course, we know the team can't speak to him on the radio because we have seen the radio wire making an ongoing bid for freedom over the last 14 laps or so. And that means that Johan is going to have to spy the stop-and-go board that's gone out for him. And what you don't actually get a sense of from the television pictures is, as a driver, you do tune yourself to watch for those boards and you do take on that information a little bit more easily than perhaps it looks on the TV.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the cars are low down and obviously they're very focused on the corners, but they all know they've got to just keep their eye out for that pit wall in case. So hopefully by now you might know that radio leads out and he'll be specifically looking for that so he can come and serve that without any further disruption.
Neil Houston comes in to hand over to Nick Padmore. Or does he? That looks like Neil's not going anywhere.
I was going to say, looks like he's firmly sat in there, so I wonder if he's going to stay in for the whole of this race now then.
So that is quite possibly the case. As Johan Scheer, he's going to have to probably pit on consecutive laps. He needs to have that stop-and-go penalty. He then needs to come back in again to hand over to Alain Costa. And he's just getting in amongst some of the traffic as well. He's catching up to Alex Anderson in the Swedish Radical SR3 entry.
Yeah, I imagine he'll have to dip in the pit lane fairly soon because he doesn't want to compromise the actual pit stop. So interesting to see when he comes in and how he negotiates these next few cars to get through the traffic.
Well, the rules are you've got to come in within 3 laps of the notification. Otherwise, you get to have a very, very difficult conversation with David Scott from MSVR, the event director.
Yes, certainly. The last thing this pairing need is any more penalties after the race. So they really need to be observing that and serving that as soon as possible.
And now that he's getting in and amongst the traffic as well, it is possibly an apposite moment to look to duck into the pits.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't come in on this lap. He's got Rishover just ahead of him now, so a little way up the road.
We are only 3 minutes away as well from the pit window closing, and once that has all been cycled through, we'll see what the position is, what the gaps are to be chased down. Meanwhile, Alex Anderson does go in the yellow car. That's to hand over to Simon Hulton. And Simon, who has made lots of trips across the North Sea to race Radicals in the United Kingdom, always a quick competitor.
Yeah, it's great to have the Swedish team over here, and they run a very successful championship themselves out in Sweden with the PR6 and the SL3 chassis. So it's fantastic to have them over here, and obviously Alex is a guest driver as well. So yeah, hope to see more of them this year, and yeah, it's really good to have the European teams involved. Down
the Hanger Straight is Johan Scheer. Jason Rishover, of course, he's had his pit stop, moves smartly aside. And what the drivers will be told in the briefing is if you've got the quicker car coming to put a lap on because you're out of position through the pit stops, just stick to the racing line, let the quicker car find a way around you. And that's exactly what Johan Scheer did. So Johan Scheer, he leads the race, but it is a slightly artificial lead because he's got a stop-and-go penalty to serve, because he's got to hand over to Alain Costa, who
stays out for another lap there. This is Wesley in the pits now.
Wesley Forgeny, like Chris Hyman, actually, another former Palmer Audi alumni. And depending on, the problem there for Simon Hulton is he needs a little bit of a push to get underway. I was going to say for Alain Costa, who's in a magnanimous mood, he won't rip up Johan Scheer's plane ticket home. As it is, he's possibly on the cusp of switching it to a ferry ticket out of Dover. Yes, there's going to be a bit of frustration and tension there, I'm sure, but hopefully if they can get out and get a good second stint, they'll be able to recover some of that time. Meanwhile, Alex Kapadia is in at the wheel of the 61 car, having taken over from Manhal Alos. And this an important weekend for Alex and Manhal, because yesterday James Littlejohn and Tony Wells struggled, and that meant some points taken off them by Alex and Manhal. They'll be hoping to do the same again today. Yeah, they need another good finish, and just looking at that rear end actually, and bodywork, you see they've taped it, but it's still flapping a little bit there, so hopefully that's going to hold out at the end of the race and not cause any problems. Obviously the last thing they need is that digging into the tyre and causing a problem, so hopefully for them that won't cause a problem. They'll be able to get the result they need. And it's also, you can see, although the bodywork's moving, the rear wing isn't, and that's really what Alex Kapadia will be most concerned with. Also into the pits comes Martin Verity, Verity is one of the SR1 Cup graduates that we were talking about a little bit earlier on. The team just checking the tyre pressures.
Certainly for the SR3 drivers, no refueling, so those that are driving their own, it's quite a straightforward pit stop, and yeah, they'll just be letting a bit of air out those tyres if they're a bit high, just to make sure they perform well for the second stint.
Suggest that it would be a good idea for Johan Scheer to come in for that stop and go penalty, because it's been a couple of laps now. The pit lane has closed, but he's not gone past the pit lane closed board, so he needs to come in to hand over to Alan Costa at the end of this lap. So what that means is that he can't do the stop and go penalty. He's got to come in and hand over to Alan Costa. Costa's going to have to go out, do one lap and come in and do the stop and go.
Yeah, certainly. I can only imagine that because of his radio being out, that he's struggling with that communication and not quite getting the message from the team, because more than certain... Oh, and we've got a spin here for Mark Crader,
who fortunately keeps it out of the gravel trap and keeps it out of the tyre wall.
Good job there, just leave out that gravel, so he should be fine to get going again.
Well, Johan Scheer, I'm sure, if it comes to a post-race discussion, will be pleading that he's got no radio and point to the video evidence, but nonetheless he should have seen from the pit board. And there's certainly a strategic argument, which is, from the team's perspective, let's get the very best out of Johan, get him just to race at his rhythm, get in as many quick laps as possible, get Alan to do an out lap, stop and go, then see where we are.
Yes, certainly. They want to get the most out of Johan as the quicker driver, so you can see why they leave out so long, but just we've got to be very careful they don't. And here he comes with a stop-go.
Now that presents some problems, because they can't do the stop and go and the driver change in the same pit stop, but the pit lane has just closed for the driver change, so they are going to have a problem here, and there's some confusion. Jim Booth is struggling to get the car restarted. Alan Costa now is on his way, but that was a lengthy stop and go. He runs down the pit lane behind Jim Booth.
Yeah, something very interesting, and yeah, real shame there for Johan and Costa, because they're certainly getting some more penalties for missing that pit change.
Oh dear, that is such a pity for them, because they're going to... Oh, and the team wave him on.
I think a bit of confusion there. He's obviously thinking he can do the change, but team desperately trying to get him out so they don't waste any more time.
And it was a case of choose your poison. Do you actually just do the change and take the penalty that comes, or just accept you're going to get a penalty anyway for pitting out of sequence? Meanwhile, here is Marco Ciencetti in the Supersport class car that he's taken over from Marcello Maratiotto. What we can, I think, predict with a degree of confidence is that Bradley Smith, when it all shakes out, is going to be our race leader, which is what we'd have expected. Now, he has got Darren Burke, who is 33.7 seconds behind him, and that feels like it's going to be a very, very big mountain to climb. We've got a safety car on standby. Can only assume that that is probably for Mark Crader, who might not have got going once more over at Copse Corner.
Yeah, real shame if he hasn't got going, so you can only imagine he's got stuck there. Maybe he did just get the front end on the gravel. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that one.
And this is a terrible timing of if we do get a safety car for Bradley Smith, because the lead over Darren Burke is sufficiently large that Bradley wouldn't have to worry. If it gets whittled down, you've got James Littlejohn, you've got Alex Capardia, you've got Darren Burke, all of whom might fancy themselves in a little bit of a shootout with Bradley, whose race strategy is about the whole 60 minutes pace, and he's now going to have to turn on a real series of qualifying laps.
Yes, certainly. This is exactly what happened yesterday towards the end of the race. Obviously, Bradley's huge gap got brought right down because of the safety car, so it looks like safety car is now out, is it, looking at the screen? Well,
the safety car graphic has come on for pictures. I don't know if the safety car has actually scrambled, because the timing screen isn't telling us one way or the other, but certainly seems as if Bradley Smith has eased off the pace, doesn't it? He's going pretty slowly into the Vale. Yeah, the safety car is out on track, so the safety car has been scrambled. There you see the waved yellow flag and the safety car board. Oh, such wretched luck for Bradley Smith, because he was absolutely beautifully poised with a 30-second lead over the rest of the field.
That is a real shame for him, and he's going to be very, very frustrated by that. But he's still got fantastic pace, and whilst he's got some quick drives behind him, if he's able to keep that car together and keep those laps in, he should be okay.
The other pairing who this is going to benefit a little bit is Alain Costa and Johan Scheer. They're probably going to have another stop-and-go penalty to worry themselves about, as Johan just saying to Alain exactly what's gone wrong. Now here's the safety car, which has picked up John Corbett rather than the effective race leader Bradley Smith. So there's going to be a little bit of waving past to be undertaken first of all.
Yeah, certainly it's a little bit difficult when they pick up the wrong car, because it does take a while just to get the grid regrouped and in the right place. So interested to see what happens over the next couple of laps, and you can see the co-driver in the safety car just looking around to see what's going on behind.
Well, hopefully we won't have a repeat of one of the most Machiavellian pieces of driving that I've ever seen, which was a radical UK Cup round a couple of years ago at Alton Park, when we had a safety car that came out at half race distance, and there was some waving through it needed to be done. The driver, though, at the front of the queue, who was to be waved through, I can't remember who it was, and I don't want to name them erroneously, basically pretended to not understand the wave through signal for so long to make sure that they maintain their position and let the clock tick down to only give a couple of racing laps. It wasn't admirable, but the deviousness of the thinking, there was something to be said for it, and I think that's what Alex Capardi is saying. He's saying, come on, please wave me and John Corbett through, because otherwise we're effectively going to lose a lap to Bradley Smith.
Hands in the air there, and he's really making his intentions clear. So a lot of frustration there. Obviously, they don't want to, have anything that's going to hinder their race. So keen to get that sorted quickly.
All the while, of course, the clock continues to tick downward. We have got just 18.5 minutes left in the race. And once more, it means we can have a little bit of a sprint into the closing stages. And what's going to be really nice, though, is to see Darren Burke, Alex Capardi, Bradley Smith, James Littlejohn. They're all going to be bunched up on the track together, being able to have a real head-to-head scrap for the win. You've
got some fantastic drivers there, and it should make for a really, really interesting end to this race. So while a lot of frustration for some of the drivers, especially Bradley Smith, it's going to be exciting for us to watch. So looking forward to seeing that unfold.
Just under 18 minutes remaining, and we are coming to the end of the 19th lap of the race, and we haven't had any word yet as to the penalty that's going to be heading to Johan Scheer and Alain Costa for that slight confusion over the pit stops.
Yeah, interested to see what's going to happen there. So frustrating, especially for Alain Costa there. He must have been looking at that thinking, fantastic lead, and unfortunately now he's lost that. So big frustration, but unfortunately this is racing and there's rules to be observed.
And it's sometimes just a confluence of events that the likelihood is that with Johan, without the radio, the team obviously couldn't tell him, be careful with the track limits. They then couldn't tell him, right, this is how you're going to have to do the pit stop. So I can only assume that he was maybe unaware of how much time was left in the pit window, or that he thought he could do both at once.
It is very difficult. Obviously, the pit boards that hang off the pit wall do have the information, but the drivers are travelling so fast, and actually it's very bumpy out there. So to actually see that information can be tricky. It's the radios really are important. So by that coming unplugged, certainly has probably cost them a race win, and going to get some more penalties for that.
Well, as yet, John Corbett not being waved through. I think we will probably see that occurring as they head down the Hanger Straight.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see that sort itself out so they can get back into position ready for the restart.
The reason for the safety car haven't yet seen officially confirmed. I think it was Mark Crader over at Cops Corner, and no wave through for John Corbett, and so Bradley Smith will be, there he is at the back of the train, essentially a lap clear of all those around him, and he, though, has got Darren Burke and James Littlejohn as part of that train behind him, so that you can understand the anxiety for Alex Capardi, because he'll say, hang on merit, I should be fighting with them, I shouldn't be fighting a rearguard action to avoid going a lap down.
Yeah, this is really going to hinder Alex and Manhal's race here, so yeah, very interesting to see this happen, but interesting to see how they sort that out.
Well, our commentary position is part of the race control complex. I'm just listening out for the sound of a door slamming, which is Manhal and the team presenting themselves in race control. It's the field jinking through. Now this is in some respects, it's frustrating for Bradley Smith because what was a huge advantage is whittled away. On the other hand, it's actually quite good for him because it essentially allows him to cool the tyre down and means that when we do go green, he can really push on, because what we've seen this weekend is Bradley Smith, he's set pole positions. He's got phenomenal pace in that car, which he's not run at in the races, knowing he's got to look after the tyres for the full 60 minutes. Now we get into what's probably going to be a 10-minute shootout. Bradley's going to look to press on. The other big plus for Bradley is that when we do get going, he's got a super sport class car behind him before we get into the rest of the Masters class runners, so he could just pull the pin through Luffield. Now here is the recovery work almost completed over at Copse. Sad end to the race for Mark Crader.
Yeah, it's a real shame to see that car coming off, and yeah, it should have been a good race for Mark, so real shame. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this restart, as you're saying, Bradley there, just able to take a deep breath, relax slightly for a few laps, save a bit of fuel and get those tyres cooled down, and they'll just be starting to start weaving now just to get that temperature back, ready for the restart, because it's going to be a very electric few laps, I'd imagine.
Well, that is assuming, of course, that Bradley's going to be ahead of the queue, because at the moment there is absolutely no sign of an arm being proffered through the window to wave everyone past, because there is our race leader, Bradley Smith, who is about 15th in the train, and he's got the lucky 8 or so around him, and it means in the Supersport class, Ricardo Dona, Marco... Well, that is interesting. So Ricardo Dona and Marco Cinchetti, they lead the Supersport class, and there is the Supersport leader, Ricardo Dona. Cinchetti's second, Martin Verity is third of the Supersport runners.
I think worth mentioning Richard Carr, who's running fifth in Supersport at the moment, and first weekend back for a long time. He's sort of got back on the pace, and he should be really happy if he managed to hold some positions here. But again, he's going to have a difficult few laps at the end of the race, keeping some of those quick, experienced drivers behind him. So we've got a safety car in this lap, so going to be a very interesting restart with a muddled up order.
Right, so the safety car is coming in on this lap, and well, possibly going to be some discussion after the race about this. As it is, it's John Corbett who will have the luxury of leading the field away. The real battle is going to be the one going on much further back, and that will be the progress of the 91 car of Bradley Smith. Now, Bradley is a really smart guy, and I wonder if he's going to drop right back, let Simon Hulton have a good 5 or 6 second head start, and essentially treat this restart as if he were at the front of the queue, to then build that buffer out over Darren Burke and James Littlejohn.
Yeah, certainly. He's not going to want to get held up by the SR3s in front of him, so to create a gap would be very smart.
Alain Costa, meanwhile, is second in the race, because they have benefited by squeezing those pit stops with the safety car out on track, but we are expecting there's going to be some sort of penalisation for Alain Costa and Johan Scheer for the driver change out of sequence, although the team might claim force majeure and say, well, the radio was disconnected, we run aware.
Yeah, they may try that. I'm not certain they'll have a leg to stand on with that one. But yeah, it's a shame actually with that penalty, because with the safety car coming out, they haven't lost as much time as they would have. So interesting to see what happens and what penalties will follow. But the real one to watch here is going to be Bradley Smith in any moment now.
Well, the veteran, the race and event director this weekend is David Scott from MCR. His colleagues have asked me to describe as the veteran event director, David Scott, which is a little bit unfair, but he has heard just about every single excuse in the driver's book for a reason as to why they may have erred. So here is Bradley. Now, is he going to back right off and let Simon Hulton get a little bit of a head start and really pace it as he would like to?
It's going to be very similar to the restart on the second safety car yesterday. We've got cars modelled up in all the different classes, so real challenge, but it's going to be exciting to watch and plenty of overtaking.
And we're going to have just under 11 minutes or so of racing when we do get underway, so I think it's going to give us time for 6 more laps, which is good news. Alex Capaldi desperate to try and find a way past John Corbett, but John, playing to the strengths of his car, is going to now pull the pin as they come out of Luffield through Woodcote, and away we go once more in the Radical European Masters. 10.5 minutes remain here at Silverstone, this second race of a triple header weekend, and Jim Booth, in fact, hustling Capaldi, who looks to the inside of John Corbett as they swing through Copse. Behind it's busy. Jamie Constable under a little bit of pressure from Marco Cencetti, and Cencetti in fact taking the lead of the Supersport class as he was able to dart past Ricardo Dona.
I think Jim Booth, very good restart there, and that just held Alex back just for that first few corners with the pressure from Jim, but now Alex is caught right up to John Corbett's car.
Now here's the fight for second and the change for second as Darren Burke darts the inside of Alain Costa. James Littlejohn looking to do much the same as headlights ablaze from Bradley Smith as he looks to carve his way through the field down the hanger straight. His next target is Martin Verity, and this has been a very, very strong first half lap or so post restart for Bradley Smith. He's put a lot of cars and a lot of track between himself and Darren Burke now in second, but he is encroaching on the lead for the Supersport classes. Cencetti and Dona running almost side by side through club. Jamie Constable, he's already had a stop and go penalty for running wide.
Yeah, both him and Jim Booth, they're running very wide, so they're going to be careful.
Meanwhile, Alex Capardia has found his way past John Corbett, although for Alex, I rather fear that fifth is as good as it's going to get, because the next car he's chasing, Alain Costa, is essentially a whole lap away as Cencetti to the inside, Ricardo Dona. They continue to fight side by side. Dona darts to the inside of Cencetti into the loop, almost gets balked a little bit by Bradley Smith, whose mid-corner speed a little bit slower than that of the Supersport cars. And now it's the turn of Bradley Smith to run wide, coming out of Aintree down the Wellington straight.
It's only SR3 is just getting slightly caught out there with the Spider braking a little bit early there.
Meanwhile, change of position as Andrew Ferguson. Jeremy Ferguson, in fact, darts to the inside of Jim Booth, and now it's the turn of Bradley Smith to do much the same. Two Spiders running in tandem. I expect Bradley will be able to slip to the inside of Jim, though, as they arrive into Copse Corner. That's exactly how it unfolds. You can see in the background, though, Darren Burke in the 21 car, looking to make a little bit of progress, looking to chase down.
It's going to be important
Bradley
for Darren
Smith
just to get through these next few cars as quick as he can, just to get on the back of Bradley so he can have that chance into the last closing lap. So, yeah, certainly interesting, all this traffic in the middle of the cars. It adds that extra element of excitement.
Certainly does, as we are slipping towards the latter stages of this race. Bradley carving past Ferguson, or not. Oh, that's going to be tight into stone. Not sure that he's been seen as the door gets slammed in his face, and Bradley Smith, he knows he can't afford to lose any time because Darren Burke is looming behind him as Bradley looks to the inside. Now Jeremy Ferguson gives him the room that he needs.
Yeah, very good driving from both of them there. Fair but aggressive. I think I may have just seen Constable. There he is, just overtaking John Corbett there as well, so that's a place gained.
And that is 6th place for Jamie Constable, who can't quite repeat the feats of yesterday, but he's got another race to come later on this afternoon, and that is going to start around about 4:45, so make sure that you join us for that as Bradley Smith navigates the loop once more. And Bradley really driving very, very well on this restart.
Darren Burke certainly closing up that gap now. You can see him just in the back of the screen there, behind Ferguson and Jim Booth.
And also just behind Darren Burke is James Littlejohn, and Littlejohn rather fancies his chances as well. Darren was 3.2 seconds back from Bradley at the start of the lap. I think the real key, though, is how quickly Darren Burke can find a way past Jim Booth, who is going to be defending every position. He's not going to know that this car is essentially coming to put a lap onto him, and so Jim's not going to make it easy for Darren Burke.
No, some great defensive driving from Jim this weekend. He's really shown his pace, and he's really got passion about this series, and you can see he's driving so well, and he's really settled into this circuit this weekend, so great driving.
And where can Darren Burke find a way through? He might try something a little bit brave into Beckett's, because he knows that Jim is going to have the legs on him down the hanger straight. So he settles right into the toe behind Jim Booth. He then thinks about slipping to the inside. Very brave move from Darren Burke as he swings out of Chapel Curve. His next target is Jeremy Ferguson, and now it's the turn of James Littlejohn as well. You can just about see Littlejohn in low profile behind Jim Booth, and Jim can see all these cars swarming around him. Can't re-pass Darren Burke on the way into Stoke. James Littlejohn can't find a way past instead, but I expect Little John will probably challenge into Vale. Again, Jim braking nice and deep, perhaps a little bit too deep. It gives him the inside line for Club. Little John swings around the outside. That was pass to put the lap on essentially, rather than pass for position. Darren Burke has got Jeremy Ferguson ahead of him. Once he clears Jeremy Ferguson, then it's a clear run at Bradley Smith. We've got just under 5 minutes remaining. It's going to be touch and go whether it's going to be to start the penultimate lap of the race this time around.
Slight lock up there from Darren Burke. You can see he's pushing very, very hard to close that gap. He's keen to get up towards that front position there.
Meanwhile, Alex Kapadia is the quickest car on the circuit. He's out in clear air in 5th place at the head of this train of cars, as Bradley Smith getting onto terms with John Corbett. And John knows that Bradley's coming. He just covers the inside line into Luffield, runs it a little bit wide. He certainly doesn't give a car's width to Bradley. There's the blue flag being waved to John Corbett, but unless the team have been on the radio to him to explain exactly how the situation's unfolded, John's not going to be in any hurry to make this easy for Bradley Smith. Now here comes Darren Burke, and Darren 4.2 seconds back, but still behind Jeremy Ferguson. And I think we are going to have time for 3 more laps, including the one that we're on, but it's going to be a very closely run thing.
Yeah, Ferguson just keeping Darren Burke behind him there, which is not doing anything for Darren Burke's race, but helping Bradley Smith definitely, and Little John just waiting patiently behind there.
Meanwhile, some dicing behind, and that is Neil Houston. Oh, a little bit of contact with Richard Carver.
Real shame there, because that had all the potentials for a great move, but just lost it there. And yeah, real shame that both of them have just gone off, but hopefully both getting going again and won't impact too much.
It's all part of the learning experience as well, because if you let somebody through to the inside and you try to hang them at the outside, if they overcook it, you're always going to be in the line of fire if it starts to go a little bit wrong. Oh, and the sound of a spin. And
just lost it there.
Yeah, Jeremy Ferguson loses it into the Vale. It's good news for James Littlejohn.
See, already Darren Burke closing that gap, so he's got phenomenal pace. It's going to be really interesting now, these next 2 laps.
For Bradley Smith, he can't afford to back off any ground. It was 4.2 seconds. Here's another look at the moment for Jeremy Ferguson. Just turns in, asks a little bit too much of the aerodynamic grip of the car. And that's the perfect illustration of these cars have all the grip in the world, like you wouldn't believe, until they have none at all. And the line between all the grip and none of the grip is very, very fine.
Exactly, yeah. And obviously this stage of the race, the tyres are getting worn down and very hot, so it doesn't help as well. But yeah, as soon as you just go overcook it, that's it, the car goes. So that's allowed Little John to come through as well.
2 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock. They're lapping in the 2-minute, 2-second bracket, so we probably will just sneak another lap out, another 2 laps out of this race. It will be by 3 seconds or so now. I just wonder whether the word is going to go to Bradley Smith that if he just eases off by a couple of seconds, it will prompt the checkered flag. The problem being that Darren Burke is only 3 seconds back from him, so he can't really afford to do that.
A very fine line there, obviously in Bradley's interest to finish the race sooner or later, but can't afford to close that gap with the pace that Darren Burke has got behind him.
Come out of Chapel Curve, down the hanger straight for what may or may not be the final time of asking. And Bradley Smith, well, yesterday the late safety car really harmed his chances. Today the safety car again forcing him to work a little bit harder for what was otherwise going to be a more comfortable victory. As it is, he just needs to do exactly what he's doing, which is focus on the job ahead, treat it a lap at a time, treat it a corner at a time. He's got Jamie Constable up the road ahead of him. He's got Darren Burke chasing him now. If Darren Burke can clear John Corbett quickly, this could be game on. If John Corbett makes life difficult for Darren, then that is only going to help Bradley Smith's chances. And Darren Burke thinks about swinging for the move into Village, and he darts to the inside of John Corbett. Corbett sees him coming, absolutely nothing he could do there to keep Darren Burke behind him. Meanwhile, the way the safety cars unfolded has really helped Tony Wells and James Littlejohn. They are going to outpoint Kapadia and Alos.
You can see James really working hard in there in the cockpit, so he's really trying to push on as well. But yeah, it certainly has benefited them, and yeah, A couple of drivers come out well out of this safety car, and certainly it's not been easy for Bradley Smith both today and yesterday. So he's had to work hard, and looks like if he can just keep this pace up, that he's going to get that well-deserved win.
Round Luffield for Darren Burke. 11 seconds on the clock. Here comes Bradley Smith. He flashes through. No indication of the checker flag going out, so he sneaks through into the last lap of the race with 3 seconds to spare. And so I think he would have quite happily, if he had more of an advantage, eased off for those 3 seconds, because every additional kilometre is an additional kilometre which risks something going wrong. And on these last laps, even though it's so rare to see mechanical failure with these radicals, you are listening to every single beat of the engine.
It's a very nervous time for the driver. They're just trying to get the car home, and obviously at this point the car's feeling a bit tired. The tyres are going off, so it's really important that they keep the lap times up, but they look after the car and make sure it stays on the track. The smallest of mistakes now will lose the win, so Bradley's just got to hold it together for this last lap.
So any point at this point in the race, you're always feeling a little bit weary as well. Your concentration just has to be on the bubble. And Bradley having a little bit of a wobble there. And that's why a spin for Jamie Constable over at Club, just as you said it, Josh, about concentration, about things that could go wrong. Constable rotating, and that's going to cost him fifth. Driver, one of the things that the teams will sort of hammer into you is just get a few extra grams on the car at the end of the race. You never know if you're going to lead it.
You know, for all the drivers, obviously, they get through the race, but they've still got the scrutineering to go through afterwards. So a number of things tested there, and really they're heavily relying on the team that the car's been prepared well. But anything like that where they can just pick up a bit of weight just gives that little bit extra security. So, yeah.
Well, here is a check of the final results then. Victory for Bradley Smith, Chris Hyman and Darren Burke in second from Tony Wells and James Littlejohn. Then Manhalals and Alex Capadia, John Corbett in fifth from Jamie Constable. Marcello Maracciotto and Marco Cencetti win the Supersport class from Ricardo Donor and Stuart Mosley. And then Yanni Herpia completes the Supersport podium ahead of Martin Verity. Higgin Hancock in 11th from Jeremy Ferguson in 12th. The Bin Ladens in 13th. And the Swedes Simon Halton and Alex Anderson in 14th position. Then it was Neil Houston from Jason Russo over Konstantin Gukayev and Ivan Lukasevich in 17th. the Wesley Fongenay. Unfortunately for Alain Costa and Johan Scheer, another case of what might have been. And we lost Mark Crader for that spin over at Copse that brought out the safety car. So into Parc Fermé for Bradley Smith.
So you see Bradley just pull up there. He's going to be relieved now to take a bit of a deep breath and pull that car in. There'll be one happy team waiting for him.
Certainly is. Bradley unbuckles himself, switches off the engine, already in with the handshake. That was a great drive from Darren Burke. He and Chris Hyman back onto the podium on Chris's return to the series. Tony Wales and James Littlejohn, another very, very solid result as they are continuing to push for the championship 2016. Here is a look back then at the best of the race, as it was Bradley Smith who led in the early stages. Meanwhile, some great battling behind us. Yanni Herpier en route to an eventual third in the Supersport class, certainly got his elbows out early on, battling with Ivan Lukasevich. Others had adventures along the way. Mark Hignett, an early spinner, fortunately with no ill effects. Another example of Yanni Herpier in aggressive mode, picking his way past Martin Verity. Meanwhile, Johan Scheer took advantage of that momentary error from Bradley Smith to take the lead of the race. But as Johan Scheer pulled clear, the track limits were an issue and he picked up a stop-and-go penalty. However, that came in the pit window and Johan Scheer eventually pitting out of sequence as a consequence, which would have a profound effect on the way that his race would eventually unfold. This brought out the safety car with huge spin for Mark Crader, also tangling Neil Houston and Richard Carver. Bradley Smith, however, responding well to the safety car. He scored victory for the Spider in race 2 here at Silverstone, ahead of Hyman and Burke, and then Wells and Littlejohn, with Marco Cencetti and Marcello Marattiotto winning the Supersport class. So that's it from race 2 here at Silverstone. Join us later on today for the concluding race of the weekend. Until then, from Josh Duran and Ben Evans, it's goodbye.
Yeah, exactly.